Good morning, my friends. Welcome to our New Testament challenge. Today I'm going to be sharing with you some thoughts from the 13th chapter of the Gospel of John. At the beginning of this chapter, we have the incident where Jesus washes his disciples' feet. And so they had gathered for the Passover meal, and they sat down. And after they had sat down, before they ate, Jesus got up, took off his outer robe, and tied a towel around him, and went around beginning to wash the feet of the disciples. Now, what we know is, and again, he mentioned this to Peter a little bit later, and he says, the only thing really that needs to be cleaned at this point in time is the feet, because most of them wore sandals or went barefoot, and so had been walking in the dust all day, and so their feet were probably pretty nasty. And one of the things that servants did, or slaves, let's be honest there, was one of the things. That was one of the menial tasks. Or you got the one person at the lowest end of the social totem pole. So usually this was a child or a woman, and so they would be the ones to come and wash people's feet, because it's not, you have to get down on your knees and you have to pick up someone's feet and wash them, and it's just not a nice, not my favorite activity to do. But Jesus did this, and you can just imagine the shock on the disciples' faces. And in fact, Peter says, "No, Lord, you will not wash my feet." And Jesus says, "Unless I wash your feet, you won't have no part of me." Then Peter says, "Okay, well, wash my head and hands too. Let's go all out." And Jesus says, "You only need to wash the feet right now. You don't need to do that." And his reason for doing this, he says, "All right, the master is greater than the servants, and if the master does something, then the servants ought to be willing to do that." And so he says, if you want to be the first of all, you must be last. If you want to be greatest, you must be servant of all. And so he sets this up, and we hear this in multiple occasions. First shall be last, last shall be first, and so on. But here is a very intentional, and this is an incredible lesson for us. If you want to be the greatest, how can you serve? Where do you serve? How do you serve other people? How do you lift up other people? If you want to be the first, then you've got to be willing to be last, step back and let others step forward. It's not an easy lesson to learn. In fact, I still struggle with that. I think everyone struggles with that at some point in time. You want to, and we kind of go back and forth. At least I do. I go back and forth. I want to serve. I understand that, but then I don't want to be ignored. I don't want to. I want to be seen. I want to be accepted for my contributions. But then, God says, you do this in hiding so that you will add treasure in heaven. I get that. And so, like I said, I kind of go back and forth. It's a tough thing to accept. This is a tough teaching, but I understand what Jesus is saying, and I think it's important for us. The leaders that we follow, that we admire, are the ones who serve. The greatest ones are the ones who serve. You think of like Mr. Rogers, and there's a pastor recently who passed in our conference, Glenn Etheridge. Glenn served at Oak Grove Methodist in Decatur, one of the largest churches. He served at other churches like that. He was the head of the Board of Ordained Ministry. He was a great leader, but Glenn was also very humble, very approachable, and everybody respected him. And you could tell, you could tell because he put service first. He was gifted, yes, obviously very gifted, but he served others, and so because of that, people respected him and honored him for that. And then finally, at the end, Jesus talks about the new commandment. As I'm leaving, I'm going to give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. And by this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another. Just as I have loved you, you should love one another. How has Jesus loved you? He died for us, sacrificed for us, taught us, served us. There's a whole lot of things there. And so we ought to use that definition of love, that example of love, as our guideline in how we love others. I think this is one of the most powerful statements in the Bible, and sometimes the most overlooked, because we get so caught up in being right, so caught up in knowing the correct theology and the correct way of interpreting things that I see a lot of statements that I agree with, but there's no love. There's no love. Or it's very far down on the totem pole. And sometimes people are harsh and they say, well, I do this out of love. I struggle to accept that. I really do. There are ways of disagreeing, but love, in a sense, comes first. How would Jesus tell that person? He told the woman caught in adultery, I don't condemn you, but go and sin no more. There was judgment there. What she did was wrong, but there was no condemnation. How can we judge people without condemning them? That is the struggle that we have in all church conflicts. How do we love? How do we judge without condemning? How do we love without condemning? It's something to think about. And how can you do that in your own life with the people you disagree with? Let us love one another, brothers and sisters, just as Jesus commanded us to do. Amen. Amen. Thanks, my friends, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow.